Hello, everyone. I'm Karen MacNeil, author of the Wine Bible and editor of the digital newsletter Wine Speed. And this is a live virtual tasting on the refreshing and racy wines of the new Vinho Verdes coming out of Portugal. I thought I knew Vinho Verde, but was I in for a big surprise? Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us. If you've joined us before on Taste with Karen Live, we are so glad you're back. And if this is your first time, I think you're going to really enjoy it because we've got 3 spectacular wines and an absolutely wonderful wine region to talk about. You know, the modern wine industry in Portugal has sort of one foot in the modern world, but it also has one foot in the traditional past. And having just come back from Portugal on vacation, it seems to me that no other country has sort of a delicious dichotomy like that. And from a wine perspective, Portugal is also such a fascinating place. The country is just carpeted with vines, 475,000 acres of them, in a country that's pretty small. It's only 1/4 the size of California. Yet, more than 370 grape varieties are grown, 250 of which are indigenous to the country. And many of these varieties are quite ancient. They were probably brought from Phoenicia, which is modern day Lebanon for the most part, or from Anatolia, which is modern day Turkey, both of which were among the primary domestication sites for vines many thousands of years ago. So the flavors of Portuguese wines are incredibly unique. And today we're going to telescope down specifically to Vinho Verde, one of Portugal's most famous and recognized wines. And to explore it with me, let me tell you who's here. My friend, the sommelier, Erik Segelbaum. Erik, you are there, I know. Let's bring you on.
Hi, Karen. Hello, everyone.
Thanks, Erik, for joining me. Erik owns the sommelier consulting company called Sommelier, which is SOMLYAY. Yay. It's pretty easy to remember that way. So, Erik, welcome. And, you know, actually, before we dive in, I know I just brought you on, but you and I, as wine people, love maps. So I just want to put that map up one more time real quickly to orient all of our viewers where we are. And you can see in the smaller inset map that Vinho Verde is in the far northwestern corner of Portugal, sitting right next to the Spanish border. And then you see all of Portugal, the larger map with the different regions in color. So this is not, by the way, this is not, if you might think of Portugal as sort of dry and brown and, I don't know, conquistadors running through it, this is not that part of Portugal. Speaking as someone who's Irish, this looks like Ireland. It's a really green part of Portugal. So Erik, let me start out by asking you, I want to ask you, because you're a sommelier, you think in the world of flavor. when you buy a Vinho Verde wine or you order it in a restaurant, like describe the flavors that you're anticipating.
Of course. So, one of the things that I love so much about Vino Verde is there's this throwaway term in the industry that everybody uses called a gastronomic wine. You hear that all the time. Oh, it's such a gastronomic wine. What they're trying to say is it goes well with food. Honestly, that term to me is as valuable as elegant, another term that everybody says, even if their wines are inelegant. But Vino Verdes truly are gastronomic. And there's such a rich culture of food and wine and the marriage between the two in Portugal that almost every Portuguese wine, but I find especially in Vinho Verde, they're so beautiful with food. And I want to dispel the misnomer that you only drink white mineral high acid wines with oysters or seafood or shellfish or whatever. Nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, some of my favorite wine pairings are white Vino Verdes with grilled meats and robust sauces and all of that. So when I'm thinking about Vino Verde, one of the hallmarks that takes me to this region specifically is that there's often a touch of salinity to the wines, but always a beautiful front leading note of citrus, like a fresh, sometimes different types of citrus, but I can always rely on citrus and saline to sort of to guide me through. And if you think about the two most common things we put on food, what are they? Salt, acid. Vino Verde has that in spades.
Yeah, it's such an important point, and I so agree with you. I'm right there with you on this. It's important for us to point out that no wine has actual sodium. It's not Na, it's not going to raise your blood pressure, but it's this aspect of minerality that enlivens wine in the same way that if you sprinkled a little bit of salt on tomatoes or chicken or anything else, it just kind of amplifies the flavors around it. A kind of sense of saline minerality in wine does the same thing. It amplifies the flavors around it. So you don't even need to use salt. You could just drink a wine like this and get that, touch up of explosion of flavors. And let me go to the citrusy idea, because I'm totally with you on that. I was thinking about it the other day that some wines, like why do we love citrus, is because it's cooling, right? And even if, let me think of another thing that's cooling, like a cucumber, even if a cucumber is at room temperature, it's still cooling. There's something about citrusiness that is not only fresh, but it's like cooling to your whole spirit. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think you touched on it with fresh. It provides a sense of freshness, whether that is from flavor or from acid or the combination of both. And to be clear, I love that I can geek out with you. I earned these nerd glasses. I'm really into science, and you're right there with me. So, citric acid is virtually non-present in wine. So we're not talking about the same acidity that you'd expect from lemon juice or lime juice or grapefruit juice or orange juice, even though we might taste lemon or limes or grapefruit flavors. There's virtually no citric acid in wines, but that citrus acidity, the tone the quality of that acidity provides so much freshness. I mean, I feel like that's why lemonade was invented, right? That freshness component on a hot day. So I'm right there with you, Karen.
Yeah. And if you ever, because it is summer, at least in the northern hemisphere, it's summer. If you know that kind of snappy freshness that, let's say, a good gin and tonic gives you, that's what we're talking about here. This is not just like kind of mellow freshness. This is like dramatic freshness. Thank you for giving me a glass of this on a hot summer night kind of freshness. So Erik, let's talk about types of Vinho Verde and grapes for a minute, because I mean, my introduction to Vinho Verdes years and years ago was that they were all white wines. They're still mostly white wines, right? But there are reds and rosés. Do you have any thoughts on those?
Absolutely. I mean, they're outside of Portugal, they're quite difficult to find rojados and tintos, rosés and reds, respectively. They do exist. Thankfully, in the US, the awareness of Vinho Verde as a quality-driven category has meant that more producers are willing to take the leap and bring in the rosés and the reds, which are typically harder to sell. You can even find espumante sparkling Vinho Verdes. I've seen a few of them enter the US market, which was very exciting. Vinho Verde, as you said, it's really known for the white wines. And I don't have statistics, but I would wager, based on being there and my familiarity, that the majority of production is still in white wine. That being said, the reds, rosés, and even sparkling, they're fun, but also serious. A lot of the times we talk about fun wines, like, oh, it's fun, it's like a throwaway wine, you know. Well, that's fun, but it's not anything, it's not like real wine. These are real wines. They're just such small production. And you know, it's funny, my friends in Portugal, I remember once I was at a tasca, like a little Portuguese, like, I don't know, trattoria, you could call it. And the owner was so excited that I was excited about Vinho Verde that he brought me a Vinho Verde Tinto, a red Vinho Verde from his village. And he's like, this is like our village secret. Like, you can only get it in our village. We'll never sell it outside the village, but try this. How cool is it? And that was actually the first red Vinho Verde that I'd ever tried. And I was just like, whoa, I didn't know the region could do this.
Yeah, the first red Vinho Verde I tried was probably 35 years ago in a truck stop in, so I'm not even going to tell that story. I don't know why I was in a truck stop 35 years ago in Vinho Verde, but I was, and I thought, okay, this is kind of an acquired taste. But that brings me to the point that you just referenced, which is this whole quality revolution, because I think that you know, the first Vinho Verdes I experienced were not throwaway wines, but they were like, okay, super simple, super cheap. You just drank them, you didn't think about them. And I would say in the last 10 years, boy, a huge corner has been turned. These are serious wines, right? I mean, give me your experience.
100%. You know, let's not gloss over it. Vinho Verde for many years was this, as the Aussies would say, cheap and cheerful, almost always lightly sparkling on purpose. And it was just known as a quaffable everyday wine, the kind of wine you might find at a truck stop, right?
Yeah.
And really a massive corner was turned in quality, but I think it's worth noting that the quality change was not that Vinho Verde never was able to make, nor did make quality wines. It was that in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and even very early 2000s, the quality Vinho Verdes were not being exported here. So we weren't getting to experience them. And if you think about what Americans were drinking in the 70s and 80s, it was Reuniti on ice, it was Blue Nun, Thunderbird, Bartles and James. You know, there wasn't a
romance wines, my friend. Those I know you're younger than me, but and we all graduated up beyond them, but still, yeah, okay, I get your point.
Right. So just, we didn't have a palate for it. So there was no market for premium priced, premium quality Vinho Verdes in the American segment. So I think it's worth noting, Vinho Verde has always made incredible wines. We just are finally getting the access to them. It's not that the quality has changed the Vinho Verde, it's just the quality of what comes here, I think, has changed.
Yeah, and you know, the corollary to that, I think we both would agree, is that the world of people who have kind of opened their minds about all the different grape varieties they want to experience, that's a bigger world now. And, you know, 20 or 30 years ago, people would be like, Albarino, what? I'm just going to drink my same 3 varieties that I choose between every night. But Portugal is this absolute hotbed of fascinating indigenous varieties. And in many cases, Portuguese wines in general are still based on field blends. There could be 10, 20, 30 different varieties interplanted and in a wine. Now here in Vinho Verde, our topic tonight, it's still often a blend. We're going to see that when we taste. But the lead grape, I think, that most people would know would be Albarino. So give me give me some flavor. What do you think if someone had never had Albarino, what would you say it tastes like?
All right, so I have some very strong thoughts about this, and I'll tell you why. coming up as a sommelier, I'm now an advanced sommelier, but studying for introductory, which by the way, this is the book that got me through that exam. So thanks for writing it. But studying for introductory and then moving into the certified and then into the advanced level, we as an industry painted this single note picture of Albarino. In Spain called Albarino, but we're in Portugal, the ancestral home of the grape, although the Spanish don't like to hear that. But again, I mean, here, you can look at the map here, because here's Vinho Verde, or again, we're all big fans of maps, right? Vinho Verde, Rias Baixas, it's the same place in terms of before those borders were defined. So this is where it's from, sort of the northwest quadrant of Portugal is where Albarino is from. And we had this is what Albarino tastes like. I can still remember the singular note. Orange blossom or orange oil, and like some citrus, a little bit of texture, but not too intensely flavored. That was like, if you didn't get the orange oil or orange blossom and you called it Albarino in a blind tasting, you were going to get dinged, because that was what we learned it was. It is so much more. And Vinho Verde is a perfect illustration of that. I mean, we're going to try 2 different wines with Albarino in them tonight, one 100% and one as a blend. But they couldn't be more dramatically different. And that's due largely to the subzones, the more coastal proximal versus the inland, the higher elevation, lower elevation. But it's such maybe chameleon isn't the right word, but such a versatile grape in terms of, I like to see it as, to answer your question, the skeletal core of Albarino is always bright, fresh acidity that we somewhat discussed. For me, it's usually a little bit in the lemon family, but really leans on the orange family, but not so much like orange oil. For me, it's more like tangerine or mandarin. Occasionally dips its toe into the water of key lime, but definitely sort of like an orange citrus note to it. And then as I discussed, that salinity, almost always present. But what we don't ever talk about in Albarino is this beautiful, delicate herb background. To me, it's like chervil and tarragon, like really soft, gentle herbs, not herbaceous, not grassy, but those just like very soft, delicate, not artisan, I don't know, that's not the right word, but those very subtle herbs in the background that just bring a little bit of a fresh note through.
So cool. We just had a question, by the way, pop up on chat about the different ways we are pronouncing Vinho Verde. I think you're saying it in the more correct Portuguese way. And much of my background originally in wine was in Spain. So I'm pronouncing Verde, saying it more in the Spanish way. But I think I would go with Erik on this.
I am not the expert.
I apologize for my coming to it through the lens of speaking Spanish and not Portuguese. But let's keep going, because one last thing before we actually taste and get into these 3 delicious wines that we have is, excuse me, all this citrus, all this, I would add to your mandarin, orange, tangerine, star fruit. People who know star fruit, it's a beautiful, delicate, high acid fruit. As these wines age, and they can age by virtue of their super high acidity is a preservative, they maybe go in the direction of, let's say, quince or even a deeper orangey kind of character. I personally love them fresh and young, but if you found one, in your closet between the high heels, and you're like, hopefully your high heel closet is air conditioned. But anyway, you find it there, right? And you're like, oh, wow, this is 3 years old. It's going to still be delicious, don't you think?
Absolutely. I mean, Vinho Verdes can age beautifully. Funny, I don't know if the reason we don't see a lot of Vinho Verdes with maturity is that we all drink them too young, so we don't have the patience to age, or we've been indoctrinated to think they can't. But yeah, I think I never get caught up on vintage. And Vinho Verde is one of the regions where I find like challenging vintage, easy vintage, hot vintage, cool vintage. The shift from center of this is the flavor profile is minimum versus other regions where it can be like really extreme off the center. I'll add one more fun element of tasting, only because if memory serves me correctly, I learned this from you. One of the ways that I can approach subregions of Vinho Verde in blind tasting is if I get a little bit of a kiwi note, we're probably close to the very far north in the Minho River or Monsao Melgasso, and that is because once upon a wonder that used to be a lot of kiwi production, and is now a lot of those kiwis have been ripped up. Did I get that from the Wine Bible? I feel like I did.
Yes, you did. I'm pretty sure. I don't know if anyone else has written that, but I think I was the first person to write about that. Yes. This whole region around the Minho River, which separates Portugal and Spain, was originally the leading region in all of Europe for kiwis. Now it's vineyards. And I don't know, maybe it's just suggestion, but kiwis have a pretty cool flavor too. So let's dive into these wines, Erik, because I want to hear your thoughts on all of these. And we're going to start with this Azevedo. Let me hold this to the camera so everyone can see it. Oh, and you are too. Thank you.
You're very well. I might have started without you.
This is I think I did too. This is a Loureiro Albarino blend. Loureiro is also one of the leading grape varieties in Vinho Verde. A beautiful wine, often a little bit floral in its character. So let's give this a try. The first time I tried this, and in fact, I was looking back at my notes today. I wrote, oh my God, magnetic attraction of acidity and fruit. This wine is just like vibrating with freshness and green honeydew melon and grated lime zest and saltiness, your salty call early on.
So I have a lemon tree and it's in blossom right now, and it's such a recent flavor and smell memory. I not only do I get lemon blossom, but also I don't know how obscure we're allowed to get here, but it almost smells like linden flower to me as well. This wine is so floral, and that to me is a hallmark of Loureiro. Anytime that grape is in a blend, I'm instantly leaning to the floral kingdom, and it's usually white and yellow flowers. It never takes me red or purple or blue flowers. It's almost always some version of a citrus blossom of some kind, and I don't know, linden is about as close as I can get with it.
We'll go to, let me respond to that in a second, but first I want to, Guiane has from Ottawa just threw out a question to us, which is the Vinho Verdes that are sparkling or even a bit effervescent, are they method champenoise? Your experience? Some can be, right? And some are charmant, I think.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't believe there are rules of the appellation regarding production methods, but I would want to fact check that. So I'll check that after. I believe most producers that are doing it out of a love of the idea, not out of a commercial, like we want to keep the lights on in our winery with this. And typically speaking, in my experience, whenever any winery or winemaker is passion projecting and it comes to sparkling, it's going to be traditional method. But I would imagine there are a couple larger commercial editions that might be Charmat or Coupe Clos.
Right. And can you tell, says Stephen, if it is sparkling by the label? Yes, if it's sparkling, it would say so. I do want to say, though, that most of the Vinho Verde in the United States is white wine, bone dry, very fresh, the kinds of wines that Erik and I are talking about right now, not sparkling. Mm-hmm. In the old days, they had a little bit of, not sparkling, but just a little bit of a fizzy pop by when they were made. A cover would be put on the tank so that some of the escaping carbon dioxide or carbon dioxide that should escape in fermentation dissolved back into the wine. This is just an old-fashioned way of giving wine a little bit of a, you know, a kind of funny, not funny, but fun, fizzy edge, which is interesting when you have a wine that is already crisp and refreshing. But that style has kind of gone away. I think these are bone dry, if you like bone dry, very fresh, sophisticated white wines. That's what we have here in the United States. And that's the direction that Vinho Verde, the top producers, are going in Portugal. Let's go to wine number 2, which is the Adega Ponte de Lima. Here's my bottle. Erik, you have the same wine, I hope.
Yeah.
And this is just Loureiro. I love this too, and I think your call on Loureiro being floral is exactly right. And we should say for everyone too, you know, it's enough to say, at least in my book, it's enough to just say floral. You don't have to say apple blossoms, cherry blossoms. Although I admit that this summer I've been running around, I think I'm not perfectly good at distinguishing flowers. So I've been running around smelling trees and flowers so that I could get better at that. But floral is you don't have to go much further than that.
All right, well, I wasn't trying to get too granular, but you know, in some cases, you know, slight variations in floral could be 2 different wines if I'm talking about blind tasting for a testing situation. So I tend to take it as a little bit deeper than maybe necessary, but yeah, I'll keep saying it. Loureiro or blends with Loureiro, what takes me to that grape is that florality.
You know what I like about this wine too, Erik, is it's what I call choreography, right? So it comes on the palate, you get this nice arc of flavor, and then bang, 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 bang. It starts just being really crisp and edgy and full of kind of like movement and energy towards the end of the wine. It's always interesting to watch how a wine moves on the palate. I think winemakers think about that too. It's not flavor as much as it is. There's no good word for this. I don't know. I just call it choreography.
I like it.
Yeah, it's a beautiful wine.
I think it's worth noting, and I'm not intending to open up the debate about minerality, but I think it's worth noting that there's a little bit, for me, a little bit more of a mineral edge on this, almost like a little bit more of a wet stone feeling. Truth be told, I don't know what the soil type is specifically in this vineyard, and there's definitely a lot of soil variation in the subregions, but this evokes a little bit of a wet gravel or wet stone note to me.
Yeah. I think much of the soil rather, in Vinho Verde is granite and schist, not unlike the Douro, famous for port, right, which is right below this region. But it would be for all of us, yeah, exactly, for all of us in the wine business, it would just be so great if you could say, okay, granite soils give you this flavor, you know, gravel soils give you this flavor, loess soils give you this flavor. We would all love that. And unfortunately, that's not the case. There is no easy, direct association between soil type and flavor. You can empirically observe, oh, this, you know, this wine was made in limestone soils, and maybe that's why I got some chalkiness, but it's not simple. So if you were hoping for, yes, this is in granite soils and it therefore tastes like this, we would love that too, but it doesn't work that way.
If you're watching and you can crack that code,
call us.
I'd like to invest in your company.
Yes, exactly. So our third wine, which both of us were saying we have a fond memories of, is the Solero. And this is an Albarino, and it's from one of the 9 subregions of Vinho Verde called Monsao Melgasso, which is one of the northern parts. And we actually are going to do, you and I hope this is on your calendar, my friend. We're going to be doing a session on that, on just this one subregion on August 11th at 5 p.m. So I'm Pacific time, encouraging everybody to join us for that as well, because I think this is emerging. Monsao and Melgasso, or as we lovingly refer to it in this office, M&M, is emerging as one of the top regions within Vinho Verde. Would you agree with that?
100%. I mean, some of the most highly prized Vinho Verdes are coming from that region. In fact, Solero, this one, is one of them. It's frankly one of my favorite wines in all of Portugal, let alone Vinho Verde. But Monsao Melgasso is sort of paving the way. And also you find some of the most highly prized Albarino and single expressions of Albarino from that region. I don't want to talk too much about the region because we've got a whole other live together in August to talk about that. So I hope you'll all return and join us. But this is to borrow a French expression, the crème de la crème of Vinho Verde's subregions.
Yeah. And for me, I'm looking right now at the notes that when I first tasted this. I think, as Americans, we sometimes just say, we talk about acidity just quantitatively. Does it have a little acidity, medium acidity, or a lot of acidity? But the Europeans often talk about the quality of the acidity. How does the acidity feel, right? Acidity can feel artificial. It can feel like Crystal Light, that really terrible drink you mix with water. Sorry, Crystal Light, but yeah, it can be very textural. For me, the acidity in Solero here is almost crunchy acidity. I think it's really a fascinating aspect of this wine. And the minerality to me reminds me right now of, I don't know, like little fireflies blinking on and off. I feel like you take a sip of this, you've got like all these minerals going on and off, lighting up your palate. Such a cool wine.
I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah, I'm so glad you talked about the quality of acidity. One of the things that I've been observing empirically, at least myself, for years, and in some regions that are really hot, so hot they don't get the acid development they need, they can acidify, which means they're adding tartaric acid either before, during, or after fermentation. And I find whenever I taste a wine like that, it sits on top, like what you were saying, like Crystal Light, or those Spree, those little candies, or the Lickum dip powder stuff. It feels like doesn't mean the wine isn't good, but for me, it always sits on top of the wine when a wine has been acidified. Vinho Verde doesn't need that, despite the fact that some parts of Vinho Verde can be very warm. There's all this bursting, fresh, natural acidity. And, one of my least favorite things as a sommelier is to constantly compare one wine to another. I don't think, and wine should be compared to themselves and the benchmarks within their region, not to other regions, not to other countries. I hate it. I especially hate everyone comparing wines to France. That being said, I will say that the first time I tried the Solero, and every time I've ever tried it thereafter, my impression was, and it remains true to this moment, if I were given this wine blind and told this is Grand Cru Chablis, I would not have reason to believe otherwise. Different grape, very different region. But the reason for that is, for me, the Grand Cru sites of Chablis are marked by this like bursting, super crunchy, lemony acidity, which this is lemony now on the lemon spectrum, almost like Meyer lemon, or even like a kumquat note to this. But there's also this sort of chalky oyster shell situation happening from the minerality perspective, and the Solero is giving me all of that as well in spades. So again, I'm not comparing this to Chablis. I'm just saying, I would be hard pressed in a blind tasting to separate the two. If I had one next to the other and you said, which one is the Chablis? I'd be like, I don't know, both of them.
Yeah, there's only one big difference here, Eric, and that is that Grand Cru Chablis costs about 10 times more
At
than
its cheapest.
right.
Yes.
All these wines are, I mean, we don't usually talk too much about price, but all of these wines are steals. I mean, they're under $20, I think, almost all, maybe all three of them, or under 22. We're not in 60, 70, $80.
Mhm.
And so they're delivering, penny per penny, lots of flavor. Just another wonderful thing. I mean, we all want to have wines that we feel like really, over deliver on price, and that's certainly the case here. Let's talk food for a minute, because you're a somm. I'm a passably good cook. So let's say you're just standing, for me, I would be standing in the kitchen. You might be standing in the kitchen or advising a restaurant. What would you like? What comes to mind? Like, don't say chicken. I mean, what specifically kind of comes to mind that would be really interesting to have with these wines?
All right. Do you want the classy pairing and the basic pair, like the basic, not so elegant pairing? All right. So Vinho Verde, but specifically wines from Monsao Melgasso, and even more specifically the Sommelier, smoked meats.
Oh,
And
like what? What smoked meats?
so
Like
you said don't say chicken, but I don't pair wines like this with roast chicken. I would pair it with smoked chicken, something that spent some time over flame, or straight up gone into a smoker. I love this wine. Are you ready to be really like mind blown?
Okay.
Lamb sausage.
Lamb sausage.
Unreal, because in lamb sausage you will often get a lot of herbs, and just the fat and the herbaceousness counterbalanced with the acidity and the minerality and the brightness of this wine. It's absolutely gorgeously harmonious. Okay, there's the elegant. You want the inelegant? I am a sucker for a good Reuben. And if you think about corned beef and sauerkraut and rye bread and butter and all that stuff coming together, even the Russian dressing, putting all that together, and think about the textural weight of a Reuben. Sometimes I don't order a Reuben because I just don't want that much like heavy, fatty richness in my mouth. But a wine like this, like the Sommelier, or really any Vinho Verde, that will cut through that. Now, I can guarantee you nobody's making Reubens in Portugal, maybe like one person. They're certainly not drinking Vinho Verde with Reubens in Portugal, but here in the US, like this is for a not so highbrow pairing. Next time, get yourself a bottle of Vinho Verde and make a Reuben, or
go to Katz's Deli.
Go to Katz's, go to wherever.
Side. The very first time I went to Katz's Deli on the Lower East Side, I think I was the only non-Jewish person in there, and my eyes were like, these Reubens were like, they were bigger than me, I felt like. And all right.
I mean, they're almost offensive.
I know a good Reuben for sure.
I mean, mother's milk, but yeah, go to your favorite Reuben provider. You don't have to take the trip to New York to go to Katz's, but yeah, try Vinho Verde and Reubens. The low hanging fruit is seafood, oysters, shrimp cocktail, whitefish. I also like Vinho Verdes with any pork dish. Here's me not being a very good Jew. Any pork dish that specifically has some fruit, especially stone fruit. So we often see apricot or peach. Usually they're roasted in some capacity, or even like a mustard element. So anytime a pork dish, of whether it's a sausage or a chop or a loin or whatever, traditionally we tend to see those paired with some sort of stone fruit component and often a mustard component. And again, Vinho Verde comes through really, really strong there. I will say, and again, not trying to upset the Spaniards, their Iberico Bilota is very important. They're acorn-fed black pigs. But the truth of the matter is that breed came from northern Portugal and from Vinho Verde, and they have a similar black pig acorn-fed situation. And frankly, I can't remember what they call it, but any of that like jamon style charcuterie and Vinho Verde, absolutely perfect.
Yes, I think I just saw a, could we put that back, that wonderful chat back up because yes, Brenda, I think, is saying it might pair well with rosemary and parsley drenched red potatoes with smoked oyster mushrooms. I'm coming to your house, girlfriend. That sounds really good. You know, people always say things like oysters with high minerally salty wines. And I love oysters too, but none of us make oysters at home, right? Oysters are hard to do at home. You buy one of those gloves, you get one of those knives, you do it once, you nearly kill yourself, and you say, okay, no more oysters at home. I'm just going to have those when I go out. So for me, the solution there is some really interesting sauteed large shrimp dishes. Just large shrimp sauteed with a bunch of vegetables, some interesting herbs and spices, and you are home free on this wine. And if you're downplaying it, as you were saying, to your Reuben, I would say, clearly I have a simpler taste than you, my friend Erik. I would do like grilled cheese with a little bacon in there, like this classic grilled cheese sandwich. You know, you're just having a Wednesday night at home. You can't bring yourself to like cook something big. You don't want to go out. It's like, it's either scrambled eggs and bacon or grilled cheese with bacon and a bottle of any three of these Vinho Verdes would be spectacular.
Okay, I have to ask, cheddar or American in your grilled cheese?
Cheddar. No, I
Okay,
can't.
good. Okay, good, good.
No American. No, not American.
Very
White
good.
cheddar. Sharp.
Yes, I'm with you there. You know, you made me think of something when you were talking about the shrimp. So a secret I learned from an incredible Iberian area chef that has restaurants in both Portugal and in Spain. So a super easy dish you can make at home that again, Karen, you reminded me this will be a perfect pairing is sauteed shrimp with lots of garlic, lots of herbs. But the trick is a mixture of olive oil and butter, but not normal butter, goat butter. And you can get goat butter at every Whole Foods. Vinho Verde and that dish, and the goat butter gives it this tanginess and this grassiness that regular butter can't give it. So I know that's like somewhat obscure, but when you talked about just like sauteed shrimp at home, lots of garlic, lots of herbs, and trust me, a mix of olive oil and goat butter will change your life. It's like every Basque chef's secret ingredient.
All right. I'm ready to have my life changed on this. I'm taking the rest of these wines home and I'm going to try that because goat butter is in my local grocery store here. So Erik, thank you for joining me tonight. This has been so fun to taste these wines with you, even over Zoom. But I mean, I know our paths cross and we'll taste them again, I'm sure, in person soon. But you're going to join me again when we are doing Monsao and Melgasso. When you look at our invitation coming over Erik's social media, my social media, Wine Speed, you'll see it looks like, I don't think I can say those words. They're two big Portuguese words. Just think of it as M&M, but you have to join us because this is one of the top sub-regions of Vinho Verde, and maybe the one that's leading the way in, at least one of the ones leading the way in this really sophisticated new version that we're seeing coming out of Vinho Verde. And just to remind everybody, that's Thursday, August 11th. We'll be seeing you at 5 p.m. Pacific time and 8 p.m. on Eastern. All right, my friend, good to taste with you.
Likewise.
All right.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us. And I can't wait to reprise our tasting and really ratchet down and dive deep on Monsao Melgasso or M&M.
All right. Make some Reubens between now and then. I'll make the Reubens, you make the grilled cheese.
Done and done.
Everybody, thanks for joining us.
Cheers.